All right, we just want to give everyone in the meeting a heads up that we're going to give us about 30 more seconds so that we can wait and make sure everyone that wanted to attend the meeting is able to get into the Zoom link. So hang tight, we'll start in about 30 seconds. All right, so it looks like it's about 12:02, so we'll go ahead and get the meeting started. My name is Angela Foose. I'm the Assistant Director here for Development Services at the City of Reno. Also joining me, we have Grace and Lauren. I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Grace McAdin, Senior Management Analyst for Development Services.
And I'm Lauren Knox, Senior Planner with Development Services.
All right, so this is our fourth stakeholder meeting on the topic of housing and affordability. We have about a 30-minute presentation that we'll go through, and then we'll open it up to questions. We just want to make sure that everybody hears the presentation in case they need to leave early. If you do have questions and want to put some notes in the chat, feel free to kind of type that in. And then again, once we get through the presentation, we'll go through those, and we'll also open it up if anyone wants to say anything, just physically say anything. So you kind of have two options. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do a shared screen, and we will kick off the presentation. Okay, so just to kind of give you a little bit of background as to why we're talking about housing and affordability and how those two are really connected. It was about 3 years ago that the city adopted a new zoning code. And then as soon as we adopted it, we went back to council and we said, well, let's give us an idea of some key initiatives you want us to work on over the next couple of years. And by far, one of the #1 initiatives was affordable housing. And again, that was 3 years ago, something that was critical at that time and continues to be critical here as we move forward. So we started kind of looking at, from a zoning perspective, what can we do to help with affordability and just housing stock and housing supply? And that's really where this kind of got kicked off. So a lot of people have said, well, is this a housing initiative or is this focused on affordability? So it's really supposed to be both. And again, just understanding the background, housing came up as just a key thing that we're working on, but definitely affordability is something that our council has asked staff to really look at ways we can improve upon. So separate from that, we have Assembly Bill 213. Our state meets every 2 years as part of the state legislature. And so they meet for about 6 months. And at the end of that, we get a list of bills that then we have to implement. So we just finished this last legislative session, and one bill that came out of that does require some changes to our ordinance. And so I just wanted to highlight specifically what those requirements were. Each local jurisdiction, this is statewide, has to enact an ordinance. So we have to adopt something that addresses two things related to affordability. One is we have to come up with some ways to expedite the process for affordable housing projects. And the second is they asked us to provide incentives for affordable housing projects. So given that those are two very specific things, as we crafted this language, this proposed language, keep in mind that that was in the top of our mind of specific to affordability. Those are two things we knew we had to address. So when we started this process, this is, again, specific only to our zoning code. This is not just broader citywide initiatives. These are things that we can impact through our zoning code. We started by looking at other jurisdictions. This housing crisis, as we keep hearing it on the news, is not unique to Reno. It's not unique to Nevada. This is something across the nation, every city's dealing with. And it's everything from housing supply to, the cost to buy housing and the cost to rent. And so this is something that's not unique to Reno, but something that we are looking to other jurisdictions who are kind of leading in this effort to see what they're doing. So as we started to do research, there's really a broad gamut of flexibility and things that other jurisdictions are doing to allow more housing across the board. And we said, well, what fits for Reno, right? We want to be careful that we're not changing the character of a lot of our single family neighborhoods, but we want to show that we're actually doing something to try and make a difference. And so we tried to find a happy balance to what's something we think the community could get behind, versus what other jurisdictions are doing. And again, there's many things we could have proposed, but we felt that these were small incremental changes and hopefully something, again, that our community and council can get behind. So with that, I just want to let you know too, we've divided this presentation up into two categories. One category is things we're doing specific to affordable housing, and this is truly subsidized affordable housing. A lot of times developers will build apartments and say, oh, no, we're going to charge rents that are at market rate or less than market rate. That's not considered affordable. When we use the term affordable, it means that you are somehow being subsidized and you truly are locked in and required to provide rents that are less than an average market rate. So there's a whole HUD formula that is, something that we as a city don't control. HUD at the federal level controls that. But we just want to let you know that this first section of the presentation, first couple slides, is specific to projects that are subsidized and providing affordable housing. Okay, so again, our goal was to put in some ordinances that address the state legislature requirements. What are we doing to expedite affordable housing review? So number one, we looked at projects that are affordable that trigger an entitlement review, whether it's, as we call it, a 30-day review that goes to our staff that gets publicly noticed, or a longer entitlement review, such as a conditional use permit that does require planning commission review. Again, all those types of entitlements, we do notify the public, we send out postcards. So all of those have a public review component. So our proposed language is that anything that is meeting that 60% area median income, and so again, that's a subsidized apartment project, would be able to go straight to a building permit and would not have to go through an entitlement review. Now, we did want to call out that this does not exempt you from meeting any code requirements. You still have to meet your building setbacks and your parking requirements and your height requirements and your landscape requirements. So you can't get an exemption from things that are already required by code. But this would just allow you to go straight to a building permit to get there faster. And again, the goal is to get to market faster. So that was one option. The second thing we were doing is proposing that at the time of a building permit, so this is something that does not require a public review. When you submit for a building permit, we would assign, as staff, we would assign you a liaison. And that liaison would basically kind of hold the developer's hand as they went through the building permit process. We have a pretty quick review time, but we find that, typically you submit a building permit and our building department looks at it, and our fire department, our engineering department, our planning department, the health department, TOMWA, all of these different agencies and departments review a building permit and provide comments. And then the developer goes back to his consultants, his engineers, and his architects, and they make those changes and then resubmit. So typically, any apartment project, whether it's affordable or not, generally it takes months to get through that process. So again, in helping to expedite that review process, our proposed was we would assign a staff liaison to help them get through that process. Now, we took those two options to our Reno Planning Commission, and they said, yes, we can support those two ideas, but we also think we could do more. So they added a couple allowances that they feel would help to support affordable housing. So from Planning Commission's recommendations, there's three things that came out of that. If you are doing an affordable housing project, then you would be allowed to go 2 stories taller than what your zoning district already allows. So here's an example. We have an existing 3-story affordable housing project. The zoning that project was in capped them at 3 stories. And so again, if they were to go, if council was to approve Planning Commission's recommendations, we wanted to provide just a visual so you could understand what it would look like to go from 3 stories to 5 stories. So we used a little Photoshop to give you an example of what that could look like. Next is Planning Commission made a recommendation that if you wanted to change your building setbacks, that you could do that by right, would not have to go through any kind of deviation or variance process. Again, that was Planning Commission's recommendation that would allow those affordable housing projects to not have to meet their building setbacks. And a building setback is basically the requirement of how far the building is from the property line. So every zoning district has a different requirement. Generally speaking, let's say your side setback is typically anywhere from 0 feet to 10 feet. A lot of these multifamily zoning districts, it's more like 5 feet or 10 feet. So again, Planning Commission's recommendation was if you wanted to be closer to the setback than our zoning code allowed, they would allow you to do that and go straight to a building permit. And then third, Planning Commission's recommendation was for these affordable housing projects, allow them to have 0 parking requirements. And I will say that from a zoning code perspective, we require parking on apartment projects. And so if you are building an affordable housing project, Planning Commission's recommendation was just put in as many parking spaces as you want and not have to meet our zoning code requirements. So those were the 3 recommendations that Planning Commission recommended above and beyond what staff's recommendation was. All right, and then the next kind of bigger topic is specific to affordable housing again, and the idea of density bonus. Our zoning code right now allows affordable housing projects to have a density bonus. And just as an example of what that means, if you're on a site and let's say that the zoning district you're in allows you to have 10 apartment units with this density bonus that's in place today. So again, no changes, just what we already allow today. If you're providing that 60% area median income, so it's subsidized, we allow you to have 45% more units. So if you had an example of 10 apartment units were allowed, with today's density bonus, you could do an additional 4 units. We looked at that and we said, well, that sounds like it's something that would help these projects. How effective is it? We went back and we just looked at the last 3 years worth of data, and we have had 1 additional affordable housing unit come online through that density bonus. So from a staff perspective, we felt that the way the code is currently written with that 45% increase in density does not seem to be doing much to move the needle in terms of more housing. So we said, well, what if we increase that to unlimited density? So again, you still have to show that you're affordable. We do require that you deed restrict that. So for the 20 years, you have to show that you're maintaining that affordability. And we do annual reviews and we check on that. So yes, you are committed to do that if you want this incentive. Again, from staff's perspective, you would still have to meet your setbacks. You still have to meet your height requirements. You're just able to get more units in the building square footage that you're allowed to do. And then second from that is in trying to accommodate what the state law has for affordable housing. State law actually breaks down workforce housing, and that is anything from 61% of your area median income up to 120% of your area median income. We currently don't allow any additional incentives or require anything new or unique for that level of affordability. We said, gosh, in trying to make sure our rules better align with state law rules, we should probably allow some incentives if you want to do that workforce housing. So we added some density bonuses, again, if you're able to meet that affordability. And we didn't propose to give you the unlimited density bonus. It was more of a 35% density bonus and a 45% density bonus. Still trying to provide a little bit more incentive so we can get more of these affordable housing projects on the market. Okay, so those are the 2 slides specific to affordable housing. And so that hopefully will address the state legislature concerns that we incentivize affordable housing and that we expedite review of affordable housing. So separate from that topic, we are still, again, trying to just grapple with this housing crisis that we as a nation are dealing with. And we feel it too here at the city of Reno. I can't tell you how many people come to us and say, I can't afford to buy a house. The average house right now is over $500,000. So as a starter home, most people cannot afford to buy a starter home. And even rents, we're finding that a lot of rents for apartments or rents for houses is actually higher than what a lot of mortgages are. So, I mean, that's a problem. We want people to be able to live here and be able to, work here, and the salaries that they make should go to being able to pay their rent and their mortgage. Ideally, you only want to put aside 30% of your income on a monthly basis to pay for housing, and we're finding that it is just much higher. The average, family is not able to just set aside 30% of their income to go towards housing. It's much, much more. So in trying to address really the housing supply, here's a couple of things that we looked at across the country and things that we felt might be appropriate for Reno. Okay, so back to the density bonus. Again, this density bonus is not specific to affordability. So we're not looking at the price that you're charging. We're looking at more of the size of the unit. And the smaller the unit, the more density bonus we would be providing. So we've had this section in our zoning code for the last 3 years, and it's been pretty useful. I would say, we went back and we looked at over the last 3 years, how many new projects have used this density bonus. We've had about 12 projects in 3 years that have used this density bonus, and that equates to about 60 additional housing units that have come online using this density bonus. So again, I don't know that 60 additional units in 3 years has really moved the needle in terms of housing supply. So we said, well, let's increase the density bonus. So looking at, again, this little chart or these bullet points, the very bottom one, if you're at 1,000 square feet or less, that's the square footage of your unit, your apartment unit. So if you're 1,000 square feet or less, we currently give you a 45% density bonus. So that is, if your zoning says you can have 10 units, you would get an additional 4 units if they're those small units. And we increase that, or proposing to increase that. Instead of a 45% density bonus, we're proposing to up that to 80%. So again, hoping to get a couple more of these infill units added to the market. And then we also have existing breakdowns. If your unit size is 1,400 square feet or less, you currently are allowed to do a 30% density bonus. We're proposing to increase that to a 45% increase in the number of units. And then finally, that last kind of category at the top, if your units are 1,800 square feet or less, we currently give you just a tiny density bonus of 15% more. So we're proposing to up that to 35% more. Now, we have gotten a lot of questions from the public of, does this also impact projects that are in the South Meadows area where we're starting to see a lot more apartments come online? Anything that's in a planned unit development or these master plan communities, none of this would apply. This is specific to zoning districts that are just standard city zoning. Anything that's in a planned unit development, they have their own set of requirements, so this would not apply. So anything in South Meadows or Double Diamond or Damani, this would not apply. They could not use the density bonus. They could not use the affordable incentives. These things that we're talking about here only apply to just our standard city zoning. Okay, so just to give you some examples of how we've used that density bonus in the past couple of years, we provided some very specific pictures to show you kind of what we've gotten. This first one is a Motel 6. And so they started with a motel and it had 124 rooms. And because the zoning capped them at density, they could only convert 88 of those rooms, those motel rooms, into residential units, which was unfortunate because they wanted to take the whole existing motel and take each motel room and add kitchens and upgrade them with, nicer bathrooms and turn them into studios. So through this density bonus that we currently have in code, they were able to get an additional 36 units. So all of the 124 motel rooms were able to be converted. So this is an example of something we have done already. We've approved this. It's already in our zoning code. So just to give you an example of how we can use existing space, existing buildings, and add more residential units to our supply. Another one that we wanted to give you an example of, this is a brand new construction. This was infill. And this is a property off of Wells Avenue, and it was a pretty small site. It was less than half an acre in size, which is, again, pretty small if you're doing infill. You still have to meet parking requirements and landscaping and all your building setbacks. And so just based on the zoning, they were allowed to have 16 units on this site. And they used the density bonus and they got 2 more units. So again, this didn't have a substantial impact on the neighborhood or even that block itself. And I would say the average person wouldn't even know the difference between the 16 that were allowed versus the 18 that were built. So this is a good example, again, of how we're seeing a lot of these smaller infill projects use this density bonus to get a couple more additional units on the market. All right, and then the next kind of big category is development by right. So we have a lot of zoning here in the city of Reno where you can build apartments by right, meaning straight to a building permit, no public review process. All of our mixed use zoning categories, you have kind of unlimited density and you can go straight to a building permit. But we have some very specific zoning categories where we also require an entitlement review for apartments. And so basically we have 3 multifamily zoning districts, that MF14, MF21, and MF30, where today we require an entitlement review process. Also in our commercial zones, that neighborhood commercial and general commercial, we do require an entitlement review process. And then in our professional office zoning district. So we looked at some of our sister cities and other communities in Nevada and outside of Nevada, and we said, well, what's the trigger for when most other jurisdictions require a public review versus when something can go straight to a building permit? And you think, well, why wouldn't you not want to include public review? You know, if our goal is to get housing to market faster, adding months sometimes and months of public review can often delay a project. And at the end of the day, you get the same project. So you're adding time and money to a lot of these development projects when at the end of the day, it's the exact same project. They just had to go through several months of added review to get to the same result. So we looked at Sparks and Carson and Fernley and Henderson and Clark County and even outside of Nevada. And again, we looked at, you know, Boise and Spokane, Washington and other communities that are similar in size. And they generally used kind of this threshold of 100 units as to what would trigger a public review. So anything less than 100 units, they generally allow to go straight to a building permit by right. So we proposed to do something similar, specific to these 6 different zoning categories. If you're 100 units or more, you would still trigger a public review process. You'd have to go to Planning Commission. But if you're less than 100 units, we propose to change the code to say you can go straight to a building permit. We wanted to give you a couple examples of projects that have come forward in the last couple of years that have had to go through that public review process, just so you get a better idea of, again, the size and the look and the scope. This first one, Vesta Apartments, that's in the Midtown area. That's under construction now. It's a great little project. It has 40 units. It has parking on the ground floor and then 3 stories of apartments above that. Then that middle picture is Orvada. That is an affordable housing project. 40 units, again, fairly small in size. It's constructed now, so it's kind of nice to see what it looks like after the fact. And then that far right one is the Grand Canyon Apartments. That's that one where we added an additional 2 through the density bonus. So again, it was just a small project, 18 units, but all of these projects had to go through an additional entitlement review. And generally speaking, it took anywhere from, 2 months to 6 months. It added that extra length to their timeline. So that is an extra 2 to 6 months where, again, the project was still approved. Same project, but it just added extra time and money that they could have been under construction sooner. All right, and then that last kind of topic for the group is what we're calling missing middle. This is a big buzz term that I think a lot of us have heard just on the news. What is missing middle? And you think about, typically in Reno, you have kind of 2 kinds of housing products. It's either apartments or it's single family development. Missing middle is kind of everything else in between. We've got townhomes, we've got condominiums, we've got duplexes and triplexes and fourplexes. So we don't see a ton of that type of development, but we are seeing across the board, other communities are allowing these types of developments by right. And they're looking at allowing them in different single family zoning districts. So our city code has 4 different single family zoning districts. The 2 that we called out are SF3 and SF5. These are kind of your larger lots. That SF3 zoning district means you have to have about a 1/4 acre size lot, so a fairly good size lot. And then that SF5 requires you have to have at least a 9,000 square foot lot. So again, a pretty decent lot. We currently do not allow duplex, triplex, and fourplex in those 2 zoning districts. So staff's proposal was to start allowing them in those two zoning districts, but with a conditional use permit. So you would still have to go through a 3-month review process. Ultimately, it would be up to Planning Commission, but there would be a public review. So that was staff's recommendation. I will add that we already allow duplex, triplex, and fourplex across much of our city. In fact, 2 of our existing single-family zoning districts, they're allowed today. So they're allowed today with a conditional use permit. We just don't see a whole lot of these developments. Well, I thought this was a good idea just to show you guys an example. Here's a map. It's a City of Reno map. And everything in green is based on today where you could build a duplex, triplex, or fourplex. And so everything in that orange color would be the areas that staff's proposing to also allow duplex, triplex, and fourplex. And again, staff's proposal was to allow them, but still require a conditional use permit with that public review process. Now, we did take this to Planning Commission, and they actually wanted to take it up a notch, so to speak. And their proposal was that in all of our single-family zoning districts, all 4 of them, that you would be allowed to do the duplex, triplex, and fourplex by right, meaning no public review process. So again, here's a map to better understand what that looks like. Everything in green is where you can do it today. Everything in that orange would be those additional 4 zoning districts that Planning Commission's recommendation would be that they could go straight to a building permit. Just to give you an idea, again, we went back and we looked at building permits that have come in the last couple of years. You know, how often are we getting a duplex come in for a building permit? In last 3 years, we've had 26 building permits come in for a duplex in just different parts of the city. In terms of a triplex, so that's basically 3 units tied together. We've had 14 triplex units come in for a building permit. And then the fourplex, which is 4 units tied together, we've had 10. So in 3 years, we have not had a huge influx of these types of developments, and they're allowed through a lot of our city. Again, that map just really shows that huge areas of our city they're allowed today, and so we're not seeing a lot. But again, if our intent is to just provide more opportunity for different housing products and that missing middle, we're hoping that this would be a small incremental change. Now, I do want to let people know that you still have to meet all of our zoning code requirements. So any kind of development, especially in a single family zoning district, we have pretty strict requirements. Number 1 is you have to be able to have apartments, first of all, as an allowed use. And so in most of our single family zoning districts, you cannot build apartments today. The ones that you can, apartments, you'd still have to go through a conditional use permit, so that wouldn't change. And you still have to meet all your other standards. So you have to meet your building height standard and your setback standards. Again, that was staff's proposal. So all those things would still be in play. We also have maximum lot coverage. A lot of our single family zoning districts have a limit of how much building you could have on a site. So typically that really limits how much square footage or a house or an apartment or a duplex would be able to actually fit on these single family zoning district sites. So that's been kind of a limiting factor just across the board and historically. None of these changes would have any impact on our building code or our fire codes. You still have to meet all of those regulations. Again, some of the changes that staff proposed were different from what Planning Commission proposed. So from Planning Commission's perspectives, if you're doing affordable housing, they offered more flexibility. They allowed you to go 2 stories taller if you're doing an affordable housing project. And they also allowed you to encroach into your setbacks if you're doing an affordable housing project. But again, that was Planning Commission's recommendation. We have not vetted that through our city council yet. So big picture, again, I just wanted to hopefully share this information with the public and hopefully alleviate some of their concerns. Is no, we're not going to see this huge influx of apartments. These changes don't impact anywhere that has a homeowners association that restricts apartments. If your HOA says that you cannot have a duplex, then you can't have a duplex. From that perspective, the zoning code wouldn't trump that. Your HOA would trump that. Anything with a master plan community or that planned unit development, that's Somerset, that is Collin Ranch, all of the South Meadows, generally that area is all planned unit development. So none of this would impact any of those areas. All right, next steps then. Like I said, we we had a couple stakeholder meetings in January, and then we took these ideas to Planning Commission and they came up with some additional recommendations. So we're vetting that through just the community now through these 4 stakeholder meetings. Next step for us then is to go to City Council, which will be scheduled on May 8th, to get their input and feedback. They won't be making any formal recommendations in terms of votes and that just says, yep, this goes into place today. They basically will give staff some feedback, and we will take that feedback and then we will go finalize a draft, what we call first ordinance. So we still have to go to City Council 3 more times. So we have plenty of opportunity if there's things you like or you don't like. Lots of opportunity for the public to weigh in and for City Council members to make some formal recommendations to staff before we actually move forward with adoption of anything. Okay, so that ends our presentation. And we are going to open it up. I'm going to go ahead and do a stop share. We're going to open it up to Q&A. So if you have any comments and you just want to, or a question, you want to type it in, I will read the questions out loud and then we'll go through and I'll answer them for you. If you would rather say something out loud, feel free to just wave your virtual hand and we will move you over and then you can ask your question. But again, whatever you're more comfortable with. Some people prefer to say it out loud, others prefer to write in the Q&A box. So just wanted to give you options in case you prefer one or the other. Okay, we do have a question. Is this presentation saved or posted anywhere? So yes, we do have a separate City of Reno kind of web page. We're going to post all of our virtual meetings. We've had 4 meetings, so we're going to post all those. So you can forward that to any of your friends that maybe are interested. And we will also post this formal presentation. The red line changes, the changes that are proposed and the recommendations from Planning Commission is currently on our website. So if you want to see the nuts and bolts and more of the technical, that is posted on our website. Next question is, what types of efforts are being made to inform developers of these incentives? So we do have an email list that includes people that are just interested as citizens. We also included individuals that are involved in development. So that includes some of the specific affordable housing developers. They've been involved in since, gosh, I think we started sending emails out last summer. And talking about some of our zoning code changes, but we continue to send out these emails and hopefully get feedback from people. I think for the most part, the affordable housing community has been in support of these changes. Anything we can do to help get housing to market faster, they generally have been in support of. And then next question. If approved, how would this impact unincorporated Washoe County? It's a great question. Because our zoning code is specific to the City of Reno, we have 0 jurisdiction over Sparks or unincorporated Washoe County. So none of this would affect any development in Sparks or unincorporated Washoe County. Okay, next question. It says you move from duplexes and triplexes to apartments when speaking about requirements. When someone can build by right, do they have to comply? So yes, our zoning code has probably, gosh, 20 different zoning districts. And within each zoning district, we lay out what uses are allowed. So apartments are allowed in some and not in others. You know, single family development is allowed in some zoning and not others. Duplex, triplex, and fourplex is also allowed in some zoning districts, not others. So every zoning district, we have a table in our zoning code that says where those different types of uses would be allowed. When we talked about the by right, so right now, by right, just as an example, our zoning code allows duplex, triplex, and fourplex in our multifamily zoning districts. They're allowed by right today, so no changes there. The majority of our mixed use, so most of our downtown or along Virginia Street corridor, duplex, triplex, and fourplex is allowed by right today, no public review process. And that's just in code today. If you are looking to build a duplex, triplex, or fourplex, and you are in one of our single family zoning districts, so today, 2 of those zoning districts, the SF8 and the SF11, I'm sorry, SF8 and SF11, you would be able to go through and do them with a conditional use permit. Now, the two new zoning districts that we're proposing to add, the SF5 and the SF3, would also, staff's proposal was to allow them, but with a public review process through that conditional use permit. Planning Commission's recommendation was to allow them by right. So we'll see where council wants to go on that topic. And then hopefully that answered your question for apartments as well. Specific to certain zoning districts right now, if it's less than 100 units, more than 20, but less than 100, our zoning code today requires a public review process. And that's all of our multifamily zoning districts. That's also within a couple of our commercial and office zoning districts. So what staff was proposing is anything less than 100 units. So again, apartments less than 100 units would be able to go to a building permit by right. You already have to be in a zoning district that allows for apartments. We're not changing that. So as long as you're in a zoning district that today even allows for apartments, again, if it goes straight to a building permit or requires a conditional use permit, we're proposing that's less than 100 units could go straight to a building permit. So hopefully that answers that. And then another question, do CC&Rs apply? Absolutely. So if you're in a neighborhood where you have a homeowners association and you have CC&Rs that restrict development, a lot of the CC&Rs out there already say, this neighborhood can only have single family homes. So that would trump anything that we're doing today. And I will say that the city does not enforce CC&Rs. It would be up to the developer to enforce that. But, we'll ask the question when a building permit comes in for review, are apartments allowed in this neighborhood? And so if the CC&Rs say, nope, apartments are not allowed or duplexes are not allowed, then we would not approve a building permit in that neighborhood. And same with planned unit developments, again, if the planned unit development, Somerset, Collin Ranch, pretty much all of South Meadows, if they do not allow a duplex or a triplex or an apartment, our zoning code does not, what we're proposing today doesn't change any of that. You still would not be able to do that in those areas. All right, next question. Has staff considered limits on rental rates to create more affordable housing? I know that is something that has come up quite a bit from a zoning perspective. Legally, we have zero authority as the zoning administrator to limit rent rates. And so that's something I think our council has heard a lot about, but not something that we as the city zoning department have any legal authority to enforce. So I think that's something the council will continue to have conversations about, but not something through this process we have the ability to impact or change. Next question then. Can you explain why you're recommending removal of minimum parking requirements? It seems to me that having housing but no parking to access it would potentially have a cascade problem. Great question. So staff did not propose to remove parking requirements. We had no impact, no changes were proposed by staff related to parking. Planning Commission has made a recommendation that we eliminate parking requirements, but specific to affordable housing. And just so people understand, we don't get a ton of affordable housing. If we go back over the last 20 years, we average about 2 to 3 affordable housing projects a year. And that has been pretty consistent. So none of these changes are going to drastically increase the amount of affordable housing projects we get. But again, Planning Commission's recommendation to council is that if you are doing an affordable housing project, it's truly affordable, it's subsidized, and that they would allow for no parking. And that would be up to, again, city council to decide if that's a direction we want to go. I will say when it comes to parking, we're pretty flexible. Our current zoning code, if you're in the downtown area, there's no parking requirements. And I don't know that many people realize that. So anyone can come in today with an apartment project in downtown Reno, and there's no cap on density. There's no cap on building height. You can build as tall as you want, as many units as you want, and there's no parking requirements. Now, just because that's in code doesn't mean that the developers are just, jumping at the bit to develop in downtown Reno. It's been really tough to get anyone to do development in downtown Reno. And I think it's just the cost. The cost of land is very, very expensive, especially the closer to downtown that you get. So again, we'll see where city council goes with that recommendation, but that was something, again, that Planning Commission wants to move forward specific to affordable housing, not just your average market rate housing. Okay, next question. If there's enough density seeking to be developed in an area that will trigger a review of traffic or other amenities. So I think the question here is, at what point then does staff trigger or need to see additional information based on the number of units? So great question as well. Every apartment project that comes in, basically every residential project, does have to pay things like road impact fees. They have to pay park fees. They have to pay sewer connection fees. So every apartment project, regardless of if they're affordable or not, still has to pay all those fees. When it comes to traffic, anything more than typically 100 units is what would trigger a traffic study. And that's just based on kind of national best practices. Most communities use that same threshold. So regardless of if they trigger a public review or just a building permit, anything more than 100 units, we would require a traffic study. There's also kind of other situations where we require a traffic analysis to look at driveways from a safety perspective. There's a number of different triggers that we would require, again, just as staff, our codes require those things anyway. So this doesn't circumvent that process, does not get you out of doing all of those studies. All right, next question. Has the city evaluated infrastructure such as water lines, sewer lines, streets, and parks? Also a great question. So in terms of underground utilities, every street is kind of unique and different. So as a city, we are continuing to always look at our capital improvement plans, right? We put together a plan that's 5 years out. Which sewer lines are we going to upgrade? What streets need to be updated because they're falling apart and in disrepair. So we continue to do that every year as part of our budget and part of our capital improvement plan. When a development comes in, we require that they provide a sewer study to show, the impacts of their project on that neighborhood. They also have to do that with TUMWA. TUMWA regulates all the water infrastructure and all the water lines. So every project that comes in has to show the impacts of their project and how big those sewer lines or those water lines are, and if there's capacity. Now, the developer of every project is required for upgrading infrastructure on their own. So that doesn't fall on the city to do. That is the developer's responsibility. Nothing would change with any of these zoning code requirements related to infrastructure. That's just one of our standard practices, is that you have to show that your impacts, there's enough capacity in the sewer lines and the water lines and the storm drain lines to be able to handle that additional capacity. And then same with parks. So we do require a park fee. So the city requires it's basically $1,000 per door, sometimes cheaper if it's an apartment complex, but generally $1,000 per door. And that's a state mandate. I think we've had a lot of people say, well, we should be requiring more in park fees, but that is a state mandate. We don't have the ability to increase that amount without getting the state legislature to allow an increase. So that's across the board. Sparks charges that, Washoe charges that. We all charge that. It's just a park fee, call it a residential construction tax. And that goes to parks. Same with roads. Every project that comes in Reno, Sparks, and Washoe County pays a road fee, and it's based on what you're building. If it's apartments, it's based on the number of units. If it's houses, based on the number of units, but you pay a fee, and that fee goes into our regional road system. Okay, a couple more questions down here. Would the proposed changes allow for single-family residential to be converted to duplex? So yeah, this wouldn't change anything. If you first of all, you have to be in a zoning district that allows for a duplex. So as an example, let's say you came in today and you are in, let's say, an SF11 zoning district. So based on our zoning code today, you would trigger a conditional use permit. Again, not with these changes, just what you could do today. So if you wanted to convert your single family home into a duplex, you'd have to go through a conditional use permit process. It's about 3 months, does require a planning commission review, and then you'd have to go through a building permit review process after that. So you can do that today as long as the zoning district that your house is in allows for it. And again, what we're proposing as staff is there's 2 additional single family zoning districts, that SF3 and SF5, that right now you cannot do a duplex. So we're proposing to say, yep, you could do a duplex, but only if you are still doing a conditional use permit through that public review process. Planning Commission said, nope, you should allow it by right, no public review process. So we will take that recommendation to City Council and see if they want to support that or not. Okay, next question. More specifically, would existing single-family homes be allowed to be converted to a duplex, triplex, fourplex? So same answer. Again, depending on what zoning district you're in, if the zoning allows duplex, triplex, fourplex, yes, you could apply for that conditional use permit, go through the process, and then apply for a building permit. Hopefully that answers that. And we have a lot of zoning districts where you can do that today by right. All of our multifamily zoning districts, we allow duplex, triplex, and fourplex today. No public review process, that's straight to a building permit. And the majority of our mixed use, our midtown, downtown, again, a lot of these major corridors like Virginia Street, today you can build duplex, triplex, and fourplex. Okay, says the map that was displayed, will it require changes in the zoning code to allow for duplex, triplex, and fourplex? Yes, so what was proposed from staff was to allow duplex, triplex, and fourplex in 2 additional zoning districts. So if you're zoned SF3 or SF5, what staff's proposal was, we would allow new uses, those duplex, triplex, and fourplex, but with the public review or conditional use permit process. It doesn't change the zoning map. We're not changing anybody's zoning. It just changes what additional uses you could do if you're already zoned with that specific zoning designation. Okay, so I think that hopefully covers everybody's questions in the chat. And again, if anyone wanted to kind of raise their virtual hand, let us know and we'll bring you into the room so you can ask your question to the group. And if not, totally fine too. So just, again, as you're thinking about these things, or maybe you want to go back and watch one of our stakeholder meetings, we are going to post all of the videos, all 4 videos on our city website. And then the red line document, in case you want to review it, is currently on our website. May 8th is when we'll be going to to our city council and just getting their feedback. And then based on that, we'll go back to city council 2 more times for an actual adoption. Now, keep in mind, anything related to affordability, we do need to have adopted by July 1st. I don't think we're going to make that date, but I think we're going to try really hard, at least to get something that council wants to move forward, hopefully in the next couple months. So unless there's anyone else, then we will give you 10 minutes back to your lunchtime. We thank you all for taking the time out today, and we look forward to hopefully hearing more from you. Feel free again to send your council members your feedback, if things you like, things you don't like. Our intent is to just educate them on what the community supports or doesn't support. So feel free again, on our city website, we have links to the city council comment forms. And so you can provide comments that will be forwarded to our council. So at least they will have a better idea of things that the community supports and things that maybe they don't support. So again, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to either myself or Grace or Lauren. I think Grace's email address is associated with all of your Zoom invites. So if you need to know how to get a hold of any of us, you hopefully have Grace's email in your email inbox. Okay. Well, we thank everyone, and hopefully we will see you in the next couple months.